Um, we'll give folks just another minute before getting started, but excited to have Trent Lange here from the California Clean Money Campaign. And just to kill time and spot your calendars, the day you and all of us are looking forward to is July 31st, because that is the day we will get semi-annual campaign finance data and get to see what is going on in the LAUSD races, Council District 2, fun runoff there, and in Council District 10, Council District 14. So that will be something to look forward to. July 31st is the last day for them to get that stuff submitted. And with that, I think we can get going. Trent, if you're ready, Trent Lang is one of the first people to show me the ropes at City Hall, and in particular with the madness and the weirdness of LA City Hall politics, which you really can't be ready for. Um, and somebody that has a ton of extensive experience at a state level, but has been advocating as well at a city level on reform issues down here, going back to the days when young 20-something-year-old Alex Padilla was the council president. Um, so we are indebted to him for that advocacy going back way back when, but also, you know, a lot of attention, has been put on the accomplishments we got with matching funds reform, but the only reason we got that was because of the work that Trent was doing 10 years prior to make sure that that matching funds trust fund ballooned so that we could actually expand the program. If that didn't happen, we would have never been able to expand that program. So as you appreciate all of the beauty and glory of that program, know that Trent Lang is all up in that. So with that, Trent, go ahead and just introduce yourself. Let us know a little bit about the California Clean Money Campaign and how you ended up with the California Clean Money Campaign. What actually drew you into focusing on money and politics?
Great. Well, thank you very much, Rob, and great to be talking with all of you. We are thrilled with the work that Unrig LA has done, keeping watching what's happening on City Hall, keeping the pressure on. California Clean Money Campaign started back in 2002. Our current board member, Wayne Williams, his father, Ted Williams, amongst others, back in 2002 had the idea, 2001, 2002, had the idea that what we really needed to solve all most of the problems of money in politics was to have full public funding of election campaigns. They started the California Clean Money Campaign with the awesome, but turns out to be slightly optimistic idea that it should be very easy to pass public funding of campaigns once if you had an organization that was focused on it, and that surely we should be able to pass a ballot measure in 2004 to get it done, like in Arizona, Maine, and Connecticut. Unfortunately, it's taken a lot longer than we expected to do that, and I'm going to tell you about our next steps at the statewide level in just a little bit. But I joined at about a year or so after that. I was young and naive, and I thought, well, if they're going to call I knew the public finance campaign was crucial. You had to get politicians out of the fundraising game. If they're raising money from wealthy people and special interests, it's always going to be corrupted. Just end of done, period. That's just the way it's always going to be if you don't have really full public funding of campaigns, so candidates aren't raising money from anybody, though matching funds and other partial systems help a lot. I had the foolhardy idea back then. I have a PhD in computer science. A couple of my friends, when we heard that this is being called clean money now, we thought, oh, well, how could anybody possibly vote against clean money? That sounds like a great idea. All it needs is a good website. And then surely that 2004 initiative will pass. And so I got initially involved helping build our original website. That was a little bit overly optimistic also. It is true that if you give voters just the option to really describe what public finance campaign is, and they know how it stops them from raising money from special interests, and allows new qualified candidates to run, then almost every voter you talk to will think that's a good idea. But getting that message across to 25 million Californian voters is not so easy. So we did two-prong approaches. We initially worked on in the legislature to put an initial version of the California Fair Elections Act on the 2010 ballot that would have allowed public financing in California. Um, I'll come back to this, but one of the key problems in California is there was an initiative passed in 1988 that actually banned public financing campaigns in California. The court said you cannot ban charter cities, which is why Los Angeles can have public financing in San Francisco and Oakland and other charter cities. But to have it at the state level, you have to repeal that ban. Our effort in 2010 fell short. It was on the ballot as Prop 15, got 43% of the vote, but it passed. It did pass in the city of Los Angeles with like 52% of the vote at the time. So we decided we want to try to help make Los Angeles be a model to help improve the chances for a statewide measure and also make Los Angeles better. And that's why in 2011, as Rob alluded to, California Clean Money Campaign led the campaign working side by side with California Common Cause to pass Measure H on the 2011 ballot that raised the limit of removed the limit on the matching funds trust fund system, which had been basically $12 million at that time. We wanted to eliminate that limit. At the same time, we realized that we needed to have a sweetener to make the voters more likely to support it. And so we were able to convince then Council President Eric Garcetti to combine the increase in the trust fund with a measure to ban city contractors from giving campaign contributions to local elected officials, which very, very important to do and also very, very popular. And then so in March in 2011, that Measure H passed with 75% of the vote. So that was one of the things we noticed. A straight public finance campaigns that people don't necessarily understand the benefits of if they don't hear a lot about it, got 51% of the vote, but combining it with something that people really do get, like the need to ban on city contractors, that increased it by 24%, 24%, the number of voters that voted for it. So that's something that we have kept in mind for the ballot measure effort that I'll tell you about in just shortly. We kept working in LA for a while to increase the matching funds, first from the 1-to-1 to 2-to-1 and 4-to-1, and then eventually with 6-to-1. Thankfully, Unrig LA and Rob came on about that time and helped really turbocharge our efforts, especially as we had to divide our focus in Sacramento with bills that we had. Michael Bonin, then Councilmember Michael Bonin, was of course a real champion, passing the Bonin Amendment and helping get those things passed. So that's been great to see that progress that we've had there. But we mostly focused in that time in Sacramento on disclosure, because our California Fair Elections Act for state public financing was attacked as increasing your taxes, which of course it would not have done, by a bunch of dark money groups. So we decided that we need to make sure that voters saw who was paying for the political ads that were drowning voters. This was especially important, obviously, after Citizens United let unlimited spending happen on campaigns. And so hopefully most of you have heard about or seen the California Disclose Act. Took us literally 7 years to get that through Sacramento, from 2011 to 2017. But now when you look at your television ads and your television ads for ballot measures and super PAC ads for and against California candidates, you have that solid black box at the bottom 1/3 of the screen with each of the top 3 funders clearly shown on a separate line so everybody can read them clearly. That was a huge fight, hugely necessary to limit some of this, make sure that people know who's trying to buy elections. We've had to follow up with that on a couple of different bills, extended it to text messages, social media, to initiative petitions. We have passed the Petition Disclose Act. When you see initiative petitions out there, they need to show you a top funder sheet with the top 3 funders paying for the initiative petitions. Those were all real key parts of the money and politics issue that California Clean Money Campaign has worked on, and big coalitions behind those efforts, tons of activist support. That's the only way that gets passed. And one last thing, this will that we've done that matters for future ballot measures and any local ballot measures also. We worked to pass the Ballot Disclose Act a couple years ago to require ballot measures on the ballot to actually show a short list of supporters and opponents from the ballot pamphlet right on the ballot itself. So people don't have to read the 100-page ballot pamphlet. They can see supporters for a public financing measure or for good government reform measures in Los Angeles County or LA, for instance. When we get things on the ballot, it would say supporters, League of Women Voters of California, Common Cause, California Clean Money Campaign, AARP, whoever they are, so voters see right there who's doing that. So that's something we're very proud of. You'll see that on all ballot measures this November, and keep that in mind. We'll keep that in mind when we have ballot measures in LA also, because LA County will be displaying them also. So that's our history. But there are obviously lots of other problems of money in politics. So in Sacramento right now, we're doing a defensive action, and then more importantly, a very offensive action for public finance of campaigns. The defensive action is a couple of years ago, the legislature passed as a Common Cause bill, California Clean Money Campaign supported, as did League of Women Voters, a bunch of other groups, a bill that limited pay to play in local politics by saying that no interest, no developer, that developers, city contractors, or any other special interest that has business before the city or county can only give $250 to the elected officials that are going to be presiding over their applications. Great idea. I mean, in Los Angeles, city contractors are banned, and recently developers were banned from giving contributions. So it actually doesn't affect the city of LA quite as much, though it does affect some things that aren't covered by the city contractor developer ban. But the whole state, you've just seen so many examples of former Assembly member Anthony Rendon called a certain part of LA County a corridor of corruption, just because so many developers and special interests were just giving big checks to local city council members and getting their way despite community opposition. Worked great. Guess what? The developers don't like it. So there have been 2 bills this year that would totally meant to totally gut that Levine Act bill. One that fortunately we just barely managed to stop last week. It was AB 2911 by Assembly Member Tina McKinner down here. Originally, it actually would have exempted local elected officials from those limits entirely, which of course was the whole idea. We want to make sure the elected officials aren't accepting big campaign contributions from special interests when they're about to vote on whether or not to approve that development permit. That got stripped out pretty early, but the bill that remained, and it passed the assembly, would have raised the limit from $250 to $1,500. So that's a lot of money for elected officials to get from developers and city contractors, etc. That one, fortunately, California Clean Money Campaign has teamed up with Common Cause and then other groups to really fight those. Fortunately, last week in the Senate Elections Committee, We had a minor show of force. We had 32 activists there for our public financing bills. They also opposed this, and then we had the groups that were opposed to it. That bill fortunately was killed. The committee didn't vote for it, so that was a huge relief. But there is another bill that is still active, SB 1243 by Senator Bill Dodd. That's almost as bad. It would increase the limit from $250 to $1,000. It had originally had a whole bunch of other things in it. It would have exempted. This is example of how they try to go. It would have exempted developers from these limits. So developers could give unlimited amounts to candidates, because there's no problem with developers, making contributions that influence elected officials now, is there? We told people to look at Los Angeles maybe when they said that it wasn't necessary. That got huge headlines in newspapers across the state about gutting the pay-to-play legislation. So that got taken out. But there are a bunch of other timing sorts of issues in there. We managed to get like 3 or 4 of the really bad things taken out, but it still remains at $1,000 instead of $250. And it has a timing issue. I mean, the devil is in the details of these bills. In many cases, the current law requires elected officials to recuse themselves if they receive contributions over that $250 limit before they have any vote in a committee vote, final vote, whatever. The current bill says they only have to recuse themselves before the final vote, which means that they could vote in whatever committee hearing they want to. They could completely craft and change the legislation, even though they accepted $20,000 or whatever the case may be from the developer or the city contractor. So that's still in the bill. We're pushing Senator Dodd to get that out and to lower the $1,000. This
Quick,
bill has made it so
quick,
far. I'll just mention it because the supporters are basically all of the Chamber of Commerce, the developers, basically everybody you could think of from business, and then the entire and basically entire labor world, led by the building trades unions. So when labor and business gets together in Sacramento or in Congress, it's to put it gently, not necessarily always the best public policy. And I'll pause there with that. That is going through. We're still working on it. It could come up in August. The LA Times just did a great editorial saying $1,000 is too high, but it's still an active fight.
quick question from Liz about the bill. Does this just apply to cities? Who all does this apply to?
Applies to any local jurisdiction. So cities, counties, special districts, school districts, etc. Any local jurisdiction. I mean, there are a few cities. There are actually 7 cities that completely ban both developers and city contractors, which is why the author makes the claim that, the poor elected officials have to be able to raise $1,000 from these developers and city contractors, or else they'll never be able to compete with big money candidates. And it's like, no, you don't. There are 7 cities that completely ban it. You don't need and the LA Times put this very well. If candidates need to take thousands of dollars from developers and city contractors that have active business before the city that they're going to be voting on, that's the real argument for public financing of campaigns. Rob, if you could share, if you haven't yet, there's a petition to oppose SB 1243 unless amended, and support SB 1181, which is a good bill that we're working on with Common Cause with Senator Glazier that fixes some things that need to be fixed, but doesn't raise it to $1,000. If you guys could sign that sends a message to your assembly member, because it's in the assembly right now. That would be helpful. And then we have a coalition letter of opposition opposing SB 1243 unless amended. Uh, there should be a link. Is that link in the chat now, Rob?
Ross just dropped the link to the coalition letter in the chat, and I'm gonna drop Trent's email address where you can reach him.
Great. So if you're part of any local group, please take a look at that letter and add your name on. We want to have a good mix. We already have a good mix, but we need more of state groups and local groups to show tell the legislature, because it may come down to a floor vote. I mean, it's hopefully Dodd will agree to it. We're pushing for $500 as a maximum. Hopefully Dodd will agree to that. But if not, then we have to uh, try to make assembly members not vote for it because it's $1,000 is too high.
Yes, and some of this stuff is covered by city law, but this goes a bit further in some areas, and it's been something that has been creating some anxiety for our elected officials. They really hate following the rules sometimes. So this is something that our elected officials are down here are asking Sacramento to do. And just as there's a lot of elected officials here in LA County, there are a lot of people in LA County. So anybody signing on is a huge help because there are just a ton of elected officials, and the petition link is super easy to fill out. You just drop your name, address, and it's pulls up your elected officials, and you're good to go. So
yeah, to Rob's point, Los Angeles. So LA County will only partially be affected because of that contractor and developer ban, but it still would apply to people who have mansions and want to exemption permits to double their size, even though the neighbors don't like it. So it still would apply to folks like that. But LA County doesn't have such exemptions. And it's not a coincidence that the contribution limit in AB 2911, which we did barely manage to beat, was $1,500, because that's the contribution limit for LA County supervisors, and they didn't want it to apply to them, basically. So the law currently does apply to LA County, in addition to all the other cities in LA County that aren't LA, that don't have their own separate bans.
and our contribution limit in the city of LA is currently $900. But for the races coming up in 2026 is going to go all the way up to $1,000. And as we kind of see stuff move through City Hall, what happens in committee or what dies in committee can be super, super important. So the idea that the recusal only applies to the final vote is really silly, because there are a lot of items that, random permits where it might be settled in committee and nobody on the council discusses it, talks about it, it just breezes through. So at that point, it's very easy to shoot things through. There's a question in the chat from Liz. How are people able to know if there is a contract? Does the Levine Act require that contracts be listed in some way?
It doesn't require that more than current law. It does, however, require that if any city contractor or developer or anybody else that's covered that has business before the city gave more than the $250 limit, that they must publicly post on the agendas that they did so. And that way people will know which electeds on the committee or on the full council body has done so, and then they're supposed to recuse. So
Wait, so I know LA County has a system where they post and disclose their recusals. Is that something required under the current law?
it may be required under current law. I don't think it's not required by the Levine Act.
Oh, okay,
The
okay,
Levine
okay.
Act is just about uh, banning them from making more than $250 contributions currently. And then, of course, they're trying to make massive loopholes through that.
I misheard and got confused. Any other questions on this set of competing bills? good stuff. Well, like a lot of, unfortunately, this is kind of defensive. We're trying to do damage control and prevent a bad thing from happening. But the next topic is a really, really, really super fun one. So Trent touched on it a little bit earlier, but take it away. Tell us about how we are going to, assuming, the world doesn't end or whatever, nothing weird happens soon. Our path to the future and hope is public financing of elections. So
Yes, thank you.
how are we
Yes,
gonna put that?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this we have to keep fighting these defensive actions, to stop the most blatant abuses, and contribution limits help a little bit, but there are ways around contribution limits. But the real solution is we got to get politicians out of the fundraising game entirely. I mean, at least now we can't mandate it, but with public financing systems are allowed. You can make them as enticing as you can afford to make them. Uh, um, so that voluntarily participating candidates can use that and use the systems and compete. There are multiple different kinds of public financing systems. There's a Los Angeles's matching fund system, which is pretty good for matching fund system after we spent so many years making it pretty good with the 6-to-1 match of relatively small contributions. Um, Seattle has had a democracy voucher system where every candidate gets, where every adult resident of the city gets 4 $25 vouchers to give to the candidate of their choice, as long as those candidates agree to spending limits. That's a very good system that really empowers voters who can't even afford to give money to be matched. The city of Oakland, voters of Oakland passed a democracy voucher system like Seattle's in 2022. So that was very positive. And then there are some states, and this is what California Clean Money Campaign would want to see one way or another, possibly with a hybrid voucher system, is our full public funding clean election style systems, like in Maine and Arizona and Connecticut and Albuquerque, New Mexico, where candidates, once they qualify with small donations, get full public funding grants, don't accept any private money at all, enough money to run their campaigns. And of course, if you do that, if you give candidates so they're not raising any private money at all, especially, and make sure they have competitive amounts so they can win their campaigns, then you've dramatically addressed so many of the issues of corruptive politics. As I mentioned, California, they're banned outside of charter cities. So general law cities, counties, and the state itself cannot have public finance campaigns unless we repeal this ban on public funding, and it has to be done by ballot measure. So that's what we have. 2 bills in the legislature right now, AB 270 by some members, Lee and Cervantes, and SB 24 by Senator Unrig uh, and Ben Allen. They would both put a measure on the November 2026 ballot, not this November, but the following ballot, that most importantly will repeal the ban on public funding campaigns, so that any city, county, or the state would be able to pass public funding of campaigns. And then you can bet your bottom dollar that California Clean Money Campaign will be leading the coalition to then take advantage of that as soon as we possibly can in cities and counties, but especially at the state level. But it also does other things, and this is partially when I mentioned that if you just ask people to pass public funding of campaigns, most people haven't heard of it. A lot of average voters haven't heard of it, so it's very iffy, like 50-50 at best, whether voters would vote for public funding even in California. But if you describe what requirements are in place for public funding systems, then they become much more supportive. So as opposed to Prop 15 in 2010 that just repealed the ban and set up a pilot program. Um, the California Fair Elections Act of 2026 will repeal the ban, but also put in place specific requirements. So it will specifically require that public funding candidates abide by expenditure limits. It will require that candidates must meet strict criteria to qualify, such as requiring candidates must receive small dollar contributions or vouchers from a specified number of adult residents. It will prohibit the use of public funds to pay for legal defense or fines. It will prohibit candidates receiving public funds from repaying personal loans with public funds, and will prohibit public funding from discriminating based off of party or in favor of incumbents over challengers. So it will put these specific requirements in. These are requirements that are basically in almost every public financing system, but there are some actual bonuses in there. There are some non-ideal aspects of some public financing laws that we want to outlaw. So one example is when we fought this in the first place, we fought when we were expanding the matching fund system in LA to require candidates to get a certain number of $5 contributions from individuals living in their district to prove that they actually had support in their district. Because before, candidates would qualify for public funding in LA and they wouldn't even bother raising money from the district in a lot of cases. They just go to other parts of the city or out of the state even. So we wanted to make the requirement like in Arizona, Maine, Albuquerque, all based off of constituents. City council couldn't quite abide by that, and they required instead that candidates raise a certain amount of, I think it was originally $25,000 to prove that they were viable, as opposed to proving they were viable like in Arizona, Maine, and Connecticut by raising a large number of $5 contributions. So this law will say public financing systems can only require $5 or $10 contributions. It can require a lot of them to qualify, but it can't require big checks to qualify for public funding. And then a separate issue in the way of raising the expenditure limits. Rob mentioned Alex Padilla. My very first experience in LA City Council in 2002 with the original matching fund system. Common Cause was going in there. They were going to try to slightly tighten the way that the expenditure limits were raised, and I went in there with like 6 or 7 or 8 other people that Common Cause had put together to advocate for that. It kind of, Alex Padilla was then the president of the LA City Council. They listened to it. They closed down the council. They went into recess, and then when we were all gone, they not only rejected the Common Cause request to tighten the ways expenditure limits were lifted, but they completely blew them out. So now, thanks to Alex Padilla and City Council in 2002, if counties have to abide by expenditure limits, so they accept matching funds, but as soon as, I forget what the threshold is, 25,000, something, whatever the threshold is, as soon as there's X amount of independent expenditures by any candidate in a race, then all of the expenditure limits are completely blown up and disappear, even for the one who benefited from it. So that's a bad way of increasing the voluntary expenditure caps. The California Fair Elections Act of 2026 will say that's not possible, although it won't affect LA because it's a charter city.
Yeah, I think for the city of LA, it's tied to CPI and is around $100,000 right now. So any kind of major race is going to have somebody dropping $100,000.
Yeah. And one of the most important things of any public financing system is that because candidates you can't because it's from Supreme Court, you can't say candidates can only spend X amount. But you can say if you're accepting public funds, then you can only accept X amount, accept an expenditure limit, and that's a big benefit because it stops a continual race up to the top. So, but that's kind of blown up if you have a bad expenditure cap like LA. So, California Fair Elections Act will ban that. It will say that expenditure limits can be raised, but only basically by the amount that candidates are affected by independent expenditures. So these policies are all in the bill. They should hopefully be, they would be, at least several of them will be listed in the title and summary that people have on the ballot. Um, People would see on the ballot that it's supported by most likely League of Women Voters, California Nurses Association, AARP, California Clean Money Campaign, Common Cause. So it will not institute any actual public funding of campaigns, but it'll make it possible to do it at the state level and every other place. So it's the next step that we need to do. Both bills are like 2/3 of the way through the legislature, but they both face their appropriations committees in the second house, and the way the appropriations committees work, they can quietly kill basically any bill that leadership wants to. So we have to put a lot of pressure on them to make sure that they don't do that, because it's not clear that that leaders of the legislature who are really, really, really good fundraisers themselves necessarily want public funding of campaigns.
Trent, can you talk a little bit about how the California Clean Money Campaign manages to put pressure so successfully on the legislators up in Sacramento through a massive email list that we keep very protected, and how it effectively helps you put pressure on them individually when you need to?
Yes, great point. We're entirely for every bill, I'll go up to Sacramento that we support or oppose and testify, and we'll give the best facts we can. And if there's any polling, and that can help and make a difference. But if you're up against powerful opponents, that's not enough. So it's the sort of coalition and grassroots pressure that we put on the legislature is absolutely key. As Wayne mentioned, we have a very large statewide email list that we built over the years. People who support public financing and the California Disclose Act and all the other measures that we've supported. If you sign this petition, you'll get emails from California, from me and California Clean Money Campaign every once in a while on these priorities. Of course, you can always opt out, but nobody wants to after they're after they're on our list. So we ask people to sign petitions that generate. Yes.
And I was just going to say, the reason is because we don't abuse the list.
No.
And Trent is really good about letting people know when there's a critical action that's coming up. You're not going to get a request for donations every other day from us or anything like that. So it's really always a very effective call to action when something comes from us. And I'd really appreciate it if all of you would share, the CA Clean with all of your friends and your groups, and ask them all to get on board, because I think the last I heard on the size of the list was in the tens of thousands. And when the legislators all of a sudden start getting bombarded, when they're thinking about hiding something, it blows up their offices, and it's very effective. So I can't emphasize that enough about what Trent has built with regards to how effective we have become because of this practice. So I recommend you all at least sign one, if not all, of our petitions, and get all your people on board as well.
Thank you, Wayne. Yeah, the petitions that generate actual messages to the assembly member and senator, we tailor them for whatever their situation is. These I don't know if Rob's shared or somebody shared the AB 270 SB 24 petition. Yes, there it is right there in the chat. That sends messages. We'll ask people to call their legislators at key times. You guys, I'm sure, know this as much as anybody. Calls are really impactful because they don't get a lot of phone calls to do. We will also come up and do lobby days. A big part of the reason why this AB 2911 that would have raised the contribution limit to $1,500 was killed in the committee was because we had 32 people, regular people. They were mostly from, the Sacramento area and the Bay Area, because it was easy for them to come for that particular hearing in the morning. But, you have 32 regular people lining up and saying, I'm Nancy Neff from Palo Alto, and I urge you to oppose this bill, or I urge you to support that bill, and one after another, after another, after another, that has an impact because they don't usually see that often up in Sacramento. And then another thing, and this rolls right into the other thing that we're doing on August 12th, we are organizing our big annual lobby day up in Sacramento from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Monday, August 12th, where we're going to be having a brief training. We're going to break into like 8 or 9 or 10 different groups led by trained clean money speakers that will then go to the offices of assembly members and senators and ask them to support AB 270 or SB 24, which depending upon which bill is they'll be voting on themselves in the upcoming a couple of weeks. And at noon on the Capitol steps, we'll be having a big fair elections democracy rally, which should have the authors of the different several different legislators that are authors of these bills and other important bills like AI bills that a Common Cause is supporting there. Really, really impactful. Really,
Just
really.
want to jump in and
Yeah.
say that if you've never done this and never been to Sacramento or the legislature, I've driven through it. Uh, I haven't either, and Trent has inspired me to. As long as I can find somebody to watch my dog, I will be there on August 12th for my first show in there. So you will not be alone, and you might have somebody you can carpool with.
Yeah, so we'll be carpools. You probably come the night before, and we might be able to find people in the Sacramento area for you to stay with. Otherwise, there's obviously there's hotels. It's it's everybody that goes is comes back saying how valuable it was to them to see exactly how it works to lobby senators and assembly members in Sacramento, because you're going in there with a group and you're talking to the chief of staff or the ledge director. Every once in a while, there'll actually be a senator or assembly member. Usually, it's one of the key staffers, uh, and you'll get several different meetings. People from the LA area are especially valuable because it takes more to get up there from LA. So yes, Rob just posted the link to RSVP. If any of you could join Rob and me and the others that are going to be up there, it'll be a very big, valuable day for us to demand that the legislature pass AB 270 and SB 24 to put public financing on the ballot. That's the way we can get this done. And
Good stuff. And I would just note, like this is we're not here just because we like good government. It's because like this stuff matters and it impacts all of these other issues around there. And on this November's ballot, one of the things you'll be voting on is changes to try to undo a horrible police reform discipline bill, charter reform from 2017. And it was a really low turnout election, low information, and everybody was confused by it and thought that it was actually reforming the system, but didn't know that it was a bill being pushed on them from the Police Protective League Union. So knowing who is supporting certain bills is important for just transparency. Why we've been able to vote out bad incumbents, like why is Gil Cedillo not on the city council? It's not because of the Fed tapes. It's because his opponent beat him months before that. Our best solution to getting out bad, unresponsive politicians is through public financing, and we've seen how this can change things at a city level. And right now, like there's a ton of cities around here that would love to do something like this, but even just looking at the county, one of the reforms that they introduced last year was looking at exploring, public financing of elections. And because it's the county, they can't do that until we make this change. And even though, expanding the board of supervisors is great, and we'll maybe get them from representing 2 million people each to a little over a million. Like that's still going to be super, super expensive. So they need the resources to run competitive elections. Otherwise, it's only going to be a half measure, half reform. So this is just something that's super, super important. And I thank you for all of your work you're doing on this, Trent, because this is the way.
Thank you. And if you can't come up, but hopefully one or two you could join, that would be really fabulous to see you up there. If you have a local group, please do take a quick look at those coalition letters for both against SB 1243 and the one for AB 270, and email me if you can sign on to those letters. So, and send your logo if you do, because we need your logo too to include it so the legislators see more local group support. And thank you, everybody. And everybody, I just want to once again say we are so fortunate to have Rob leading and watchdogging everything here in LA. We did a lot in it, but we can't be in two places at once. Rob does an incredible job, and California Clean Money Campaign is proud to help out when Rob says, now's the time we need help. So all those, showing up and adding your voice at the council meetings, etc., when Rob tells you to do at the local level is really valuable as well.
Thank you, Trent. And, we would not have gotten the matching funds program we have without you and California Clean Money. So always love and appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any last questions for Trent? Please feel free, if it's something broad, it's not particular to these bills, more than welcome to throw something out there. Yes, we'll throw Trent's email in the chat, and I will email you some of the coalition letters he passed along. But
great
question, Trent. What do you think? You were, your first rodeo at City Hall was over 20 years ago.
Yep.
What have you noticed that is like changed about city council, the way it operates? Anything that stands out other than more people getting arrested in 4 years?
It's in a way, yeah. Well, there's definitely that. Although there may have been a few that should have been arrested back then. They got away with it. I'd say generally a little bit less accessible and less. I've had we haven't seen quite as many champions that have stepped up as necessarily as before. Back then we had Eric Garcetti. He was a champion for public financing campaigns, and Bill Rosendahl was a champion. And then Mike Bonin came in, and he really was a champion. Maybe that's something that needs to be nurtured more. I don't know what the situation is there, but we did have, I felt a little bit more access to at least a handful of champions offices than sometimes it seems we have these days. But maybe that's just the members, individual members. But it seems a little bit, there's a little bit more craziness in public comments than there used to be. And I'll bet you that's part of the reason why it's a little bit harder, because we used to, 15 years ago, there weren't those kind of crazies so much. So you could go there with 8 or 10 people that were there asking for changes to matching funds, or and they'd mostly hear, and they'd sometimes even actually listen. But it is a little bit, does seem to be more of a little bit more of a circus, and so then they check out a little bit more, and then it's harder to it seems a little bit harder to get our voice heard in committee. So there are some challenges that way, I'll say. But that makes the work that you guys do all the more important to keep the pressure on one way or the other, and try to nurture whatever champions we can have on council.
Any other questions? Otherwise, just throw the wild card at you. Liz asked who got away with it.
Well,
You can no comment that if you
yeah,
want.
there's a, yeah, that'll be no comment. I'll have to say we have a California Clean Money campaign does not generally watch as in great as detail of all the other goings-ons of the particular elections. We just stay out of it. We try to stay as nonpartisan as possible. So we just mostly focus entirely on whatever bill is before. If it's the matching funds proposal, we'll just talk about the matching funds. So you know, there's we always knew there's stuff going on. There's lots of stuff going on in city council and the legislature. And every once in a while we'll have supporters say, how can you possibly talk to or say good things about council member X or assembly member Y about something, you know, because didn't you know they did horrible things about this other thing? And oftentimes that's true. What we try to do is just kind of keep that separate because, you know, we managed to get a little bit of Republican support in Sacramento for our Disclose Act bills, not because any of us on our board loved Republicans or loved what else they were doing, but because, by goodness, when we put enough pressure on just a few of them, they did the right thing with that. So we were going to laud them for that. So I guess that's one thing I always suggest is to, you know, keep when you're focusing on an issue, you know, to the extent that they're focusing on the issue, you know, that they see you focusing on the issue, you can sometimes make more progress that way.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Trent. Look forward to seeing you in Sacramento and seeing things move along. We've got about 5 minutes of stuff to just run through really quickly. Might not even be that much. But
Okay, I'm gonna bid adieu. Thank you everybody. And
Thank you, Trent.
happy to answer any questions by email. Bye-bye.
well,
We put his email in the chat as well.
good stuff.
Thanks. Bye everybody. Bye Wayne. Bye Rob.
I'm having issues sharing my screen, but this seems good enough, and we really don't have much to go through. But just really quickly, wanted to update y'all on some of the happenings out of nowhere. LA County decided to jumpstart their flailing conversations on charter reform. Apparently, they made pretty much zero progress on a previous study that they were trying to get off the ground. And Supervisors Horvath and Hahn put forward a motion to expand the board from 5 to 9 members, making the CEO an elected position, created an ethics commission, requiring 5 days notice for meeting agendas instead of just 3, overhauling the budget process, and also creating a 2-year revolving door limit for former elected officials lobbying the county. So a ton of stuff. Council member or supervisors Mitchell and Barger voted against, or they abstained. It's clear that Supervisor Barger is actually just opposed. But unknown where Supervisor Mitchell will end up later this month when it comes back for a final vote. There's still a lot to be seen as far as specific details, but we will see that come soon enough. They have, I don't know the exact deadline, but a little under a month to get the thing done and sent to the ballot for voter approval. Any questions on the charter reform stuff? You can please feel free to unmute yourself or drop something in the chat. On the LA City side, we have our ethics charter reforms that were just horribly, horribly gutted by the city council. But they did, when it came back through committee, make some slight adjustments to improve things, increasing the protected minimum budget, ensuring that they have outside counsel for enforcement matters, and a few small tweaks to ensure that the family members of elected officials cannot be appointed to the commission. So it is gone from really, really disappointing to still disappointing, but definitely worth voting for this fall. And City Council also submitted in total 6 other measures covering everything from city and LAUSD redistricting to police discipline reforms to a couple measures that change certain administrative policies with the city. Just a ton of stuff. It's going to be a very crowded ballot, but that is something to look towards in November. And they took their final steps to get the Charter Reform Commission going. And that is something that we'll be looking at potential reforms for the 2026 ballot. And on that note, we'll throw it over to Ross to let you know about an event coming up where you can learn a whole lot more about the Charter Reform Commission.
Uh, Thanks, Rob. Ross from the Fair Rep LA Coalition. So this Charter Reform Commission is going to be the next place where there's going to be a big fight for a real chance for real change at the city level. And that commission is going to be pulled together way quicker than you think. Appointments are starting in just a couple months. And we want everyone to be prepared and ready to hit the ground running the second the games begin. And they have already begun. So on Monday, July 29th at 7 p.m., Fair Rep LA and LA Forward are hosting a teach-in to go over all the details of the commission. And most importantly, we'll be talking about how you, your community members, your community organizations can influence it and maybe even potentially be appointed to it. And this is going to be a great chance to pull in anyone you think might want to participate, anyone you think might make a great publicly responsive commissioner, anyone who doesn't know anything about the reform process, but you think could be a great public advocate on that commission. So don't just put it on your calendar, keep an eye out for it so you can share it around widely to anyone you think might be interested or anyone you might want to see or hear from on that commission. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Rob.
Yes, and just to flag, we will have a special speaker there, Jeff Darr, who is currently the president of the Ethics Commission, but he will be there in an individual capacity, not to talk to us about ethics stuff. He will be there to talk about his experiences on the 2013 LA City Municipal Reform Commission. Everybody knows about the big, flashy, sexy appointed and elected commissions from 25 plus years ago, but much closer to our timeline in 2013, our city realized that we just had a horrible, horrible, horrible voter turnout rate. And it had just been getting worse and worse and worse. I'm talking like turnout in the range of 15 to 20% in our elections. So they were tasked with finding a new way to improve voter turnout. And that commission explored all kinds of ideas spanning Herb Wesson's proposal. The council president suggested us going with a lottery and incentivizing people to get involved and turn out in elections because they could win a lottery. They ultimately did not go in that direction, and they went in the direction of aligning our elections with state and federal elections. And that is why we now have much higher turnout. So Jeff will be talking about that experience and should be a very good, fun time. With that, we are 4 past. So if there are any questions,